welcome back to Crafts of Note. Today I'm going to show you a really easy beginner leatherworking tutorial. We're going to make a Starbucks sleeve, and you don't even need to buy a pattern. And the great thing about this as a first project or two is that it doesn't really take a lot of materials. It's quick, but you get to practice a lot of skills and techniques that you would need to do further, bigger leatherworking products. And, you could use a couple of them, so it would be good if you have a mistake on one to try again, or to make a few of them so that you can practice the various things that we're going to cover. So the first thing that you want to do is choose your leather. So today I have this olive green Pueblo leather from Badalassi Carlo. I got this from Rocky Mountain Leather Company. This is just like a random scrap piece, kind of. And it's the perfect size, and you don't want to use anything super fancy that you care about. For one, if this is your first project, and two, if this is a sleeve for a Starbucks cup, it might get drips on it from the coffee or the tea. So you wouldn't want to use some super expensive leather that you care tons and tons and tons about. And for this one, I have my leather gauge here, and we're going to be using about a 2.4 millimeter leather, which is almost exactly 6-ounce leather. I have a little chart pinned to my pegboard over there to convert because the US uses ounces and other places use millimeters. So my gauge is in millimeters and I convert. What you don't want to use is a leather kind of like this. Can you see how shiny it is? This is a bridal leather, and it's shiny and coated, and that means it has less grip. You don't want to drop your coffee or your tea. You want to be able to grip it, which is why I like the Badalassi Carlo Pueblo, because this is kind of a matte finish on it. Yes, it might get more patina and aging over time, or you could stain it, but this one gives a lot more grip. So you want to use at least leather that thick because you want to have the protection from the heat. That's the point of the sleeve, right? And leather does conduct the heat pretty well, a little bit more than I would say the cardboard. So at least 2.4 millimeter or 6-ounce leather for this project. And this is great for little offcuts. If you're going to Rocky Mountain Leather, their website, they sell small pieces like this that you would be able to use that are imperfect or not the best grade. And that's perfect for this project. And especially they're discounted. And they give free shipping all over the United States. So check them out. They're actually local to me, which is awesome, but check them out. So I'm gonna use this leather. Next, you're going to need the pattern. And this is the great part about making this product, is that you can go to Starbucks and just get one of their cardboard sleeves and use this as the pattern. And I'm going to show you how that works. At the moment, because of COVID, you can't actually bring your own things to Starbucks, and they've been putting these on for you. But eventually, when they can go back to their normal service, they won't be putting these on for you automatically. You can choose, and you'd be able to bring your own. And then also, if you don't want to use a Starbucks cup, I'm going to show you what you could do instead to make this match any cup that you want to use it for. Okay, the first step is going to be taking your cardboard sleeve from Starbucks and carefully separating it where it's glued together. You just want to keep the integrity of the shape. It's okay if it rips because you're not going to use it again. Okay. Then you've got to lay it out flat, and then you're going to take a marker or a pen or something, pencil, and you're going to mark where the overlap was. And you're just going to draw a line there so that you kind of have an idea of where it was. Now say for instance that you have any cup. I'm using a Starbucks cup just as an example, but you know that the Starbucks cup sleeves don't fit. How would you figure that out? Well, you're going to take a piece of paper at whatever width that you want it to be. This one might be a little bit big. You can see it's a little bit wider than the Starbucks sleeve, but that's okay. You're going to wrap it around the cup. Doesn't even matter if it's that big. And you're going to get the overall kind of like size that you want. And then you can tape it down or mark it, and then you would take it and you would try to shape it a little bit. As you can see with the Starbucks sleeve, it actually has to be kind of a curve. So you just want to trace straight lines once it's wrapped around the cup. But I think it's easier to just try to use the Starbucks sleeve for now, especially if this is one of your first projects. Okay, so now that we've got our pattern, we've got our leather, your next tools that you're gonna need is a scratch awl, which looks like this. And scratch awls are just meant to scratch the leather, literally, as a way of marking where you're gonna cut the leather to make your project. Okay, so next you're gonna take your Starbucks sleeve and you're gonna lay it down in a good spot on your leather. I'm not gonna line it up with the edges because some of the edges are rough in here and it's a curve anyway. You can tape this down if it helps you because the leather that you're gonna be using won't be where the tape is. Or you can just hold it down with your fingers like this. And you're gonna take your scratch awl and you're gonna trace around the outside. Like so. Make sure at the side you get the curve of the Starbucks cut there. That's helpful for when you're putting it together. And by the curve, I mean this part that's narrower. So now that you've done that, you can see that you have little lines where all of your scratch marks are. And that's where you're going to cut out the leather. Now there's a couple ways that you can cut out the leather. You can use a cutter like this, which it has a blade that you just put up and you can break off any blades. Or you can use good cutting shears or leather cutting shears. Or, and this is my preferred way, is I have this X-acto kit from Amazon that has a bunch of blade types and handles in it. And I use the number 2 for stuff like this. So you want your number 2 X-acto or whatever you want to use. And then below it, you're going to need to have a cutting surface. This is a self-healing cutting mat. You don't want to mar up any tables because it will definitely do that. Then you're going to slowly, carefully cut it out with your blade here. If you are uncomfortable doing big, long cuts into this, you can cut out the shape sort of, and then go from there to do little smaller cuts with the bigger or with the smaller blade. I'm just going to go for it. If you have straight edges, feel free to use a ruler to help you. So I have a metal cork back ruler here. Use the cork back so that it doesn't slide on your leather. And I'm going to use it for the sides because those are actually straight. So you just line it up, always have good lighting, and cut. Now we're going to do the curved cuts. These are the hardest to just freestyle by hand. But if you make a slight mistake or if there's a little ripple in the edge, that's okay because we have some sandpaper that's going to help us take care of that. So just go slow and kind of use the blade and your hand to just slowly follow your line. That's one thing I like about the X-actos is that I feel like I can follow the lines pretty well. Now I didn't go into that curve on this side on purpose. I just wanted to get this done, and you can see this one did not go all the way through on the first try, so that's okay. You're gonna go back, put your blade in, and just lightly pull it along the already done track so that you don't get any mistakes here, and it should go through. The harder you press, the more likely it'll go through the first time, but that's okay. Better to have control. Now over here, we've got that little tiny scoop, and I'm going to just follow that with my X-acto. Push down hard on the ruler too. One curve left to cut, so going over again to this side, there's actually another little angle here. So you're going to do 2 cuts. You're going to cut this angle first. Okay, then you're going to do the big curve. one little spot. There we go. Our leather is now all cut out for our sleeve. So you can get rid of whatever leather you have remaining. You don't need that on the table anymore. Now remember that line we marked on the Starbucks sleeve? That's where you're going to go to next. And you're going to fold the Starbucks sleeve kind of along that line approximately. Doesn't have to be exact. And then you're going to line up your cardboard sleeve with your leather like so. And this is the overlapped part. And you're just gonna make a little line with your scratch awl. Doesn't have to be super exact because this is where we're gonna skive. Okay, now you don't need any more of your cutting tools and you don't need the sleeve at all anymore, so you can put all that away. The next tools you're gonna need is Tokonole burnishing cream and a glass slicker. Although you don't have to have the glass slicker if you don't have one on hand. You can actually just rub the Tokonole in and it'll work. The glass slicker is just nice because it helps to smooth the grain down of the back side of the leather. And then an applicator. You'll take your applicator and you'll smooth Tokonole all along the back. Doesn't matter if you get the edges because we're gonna skive those anyway. That's why we're doing this first. And this is my silicone glue mat that I got from Rocky Mountain Leather Company, which just helps it keep from getting on my cutting mats and stuff. So you just apply to the whole thing, spread it out. Then you take your glass slicker on the rounded edge and you rub it. Now the reason that we're doing this is that it seals the back so that you won't get coffee stains. Now you could also alternately line this with another piece of leather and you would put the right sides this way and the wrong sides facing, and you'd have to glue it together. But then you would also need to do stitching completely around the outside. So this is the easier method if you don't want to do all that stitching. And if you don't need it, like this is pretty thick leather. And you could use thicker. So you do this and basically until it's dry. You'll know you've done it right when it has the shine to it. Nice and smooth and shiny and dry to the touch. Keep the Tokonole nearby because we are going to use this later. Next we're going to be doing some skiving. And skiving is where you take a knife to remove some of the leather thickness from something. And in this case, we're going to remove it from each side so that we can have them fit flush together when it's stitched. If you don't have a skiving blade, you can skip this step, but the leather will just stick out a little bit like that. You'll have blunt edges. But we have it marked where we need it to be overlapped, and you can go back to your original cardboard Starbucks. We have those marker lines that you can fold back, and when you lay it down, you can match them up so you know where to mark with your scratch awl. So I have an Olfa Japanese skiving blade, and the way to do this is you remove the guard there and then you tighten it again. These are very sharp, so be careful. And the way that you're gonna do it is you're gonna set your blade down kind of right about the line that we want to overlap, and then you're just gonna put a little pressure and wiggle back and forth and just slowly strip some of the layer off. Now we want to do it on the wrong side on the part that'll be up. So that's what I'm doing over here. And it won't be necessarily pretty. Skiving takes practice. But you can see as it gets thinner as I go towards the edge, that's what you want, is thinner towards the edge. And the best way is to wiggle back and forth like that. And if it's a little uneven, you can smooth it out with sandpaper or with your skiving blade. You want to be careful you don't go too thin though and accidentally remove some of the length. That would be bad. Although not unfixable. And we can clean this up again with sandpaper. Okay, then we're gonna skive the right side of the under part. And basically this is just this tab here. We did mark it on this side, but if you want to mark it again, grab your pattern, make sure you line it up. I have the purple marker part overlapped and then folded under. Get your scratch awl and just lightly put it next to just so you have a guide. It's okay if there's a little bit extra. Again, you're gonna take your skiver, or not if you don't want to do this step, and just slowly remove some material. So when that's done, that should be thinner. And if you were to take the two pieces and overlap, you would see that they fit a little bit more flush. Okay. Next, you're gonna need sandpaper, of which I have 2 grits here. I've got 220 grit. This is to smooth out unevenness and big chunks. And then I have 1000 grit, which is to make everything nice and smooth and even. So you always want to start with the highest grit first. And you're going to clean up these edges. So just a little sandpaper here will take care of that. You can clean this up. Just until things are even. This is the messy part. Careful of the top leather. Make sure you don't get it scratched on anything. When you're using the 220 grit, you don't have to do it a lot because it will take, as you can see, a lot off. You just want to even things out. So once you have the 220 grit cleaned up, or everything's kind of even and smooth, then you're going to use the fine grit. You might have to do this one a little bit more. As a note of suggestion, I would make sure you always wash your hands before you work with leather, and don't put on any heavy lotions before you do, because it will definitely absorb into the surfaces of some. For a project like this, it doesn't matter as much, but you'll definitely notice it if you try to make something with a nicer, especially shiny leather or something, you'll see it. So after you do all of that sanding, it creates an edge on the very bit side of the leather that we now have to get rid of and to make it look nice. So this is where you need an edge beveler. Edge bevelers look like this, and there's other types that look like a long skinny groove between 2 prongs of metal, and this is a Kyoshin L1, and you always want to make sure these are very sharp. And there are sharpening jigs with little metal rods and sandpaper to sharpen them. Mine has recently been sharpened, so I'm not going to sharpen it, but that is something you do want to make sure is sharp when you're going to use it to make it work effectively. So you want to set it at the angle that you want to use on the leather, which is about 45 degrees, and you want to apply equal pressure the whole way so that it's even, and you'll get a little tail if you're doing it right. It's not something you want to press really hard on because it will groove your leather and you don't want that. And then you can check it and make sure it's even, see if you missed a spot. Maybe a little right here. Okay, and then you get those little tails. Then you're going to do the other side. It's okay if it doesn't come off all in one go too. You just restart. Just make sure you get all the spots. Then you're going to turn it over and you're going to do the back side, the same thing. It is harder to do edge beveling on the wrong side of the leather, but that's okay. It'll still work. So I should note that burnishing the leather and edge beveling to then burnish is something that only works with veg tan. This is veg tan leather. If you're using chrome tan leather, then you wouldn't be doing burnishing cream because it doesn't burnish. And you would have to do a different method such as paint. Okay, then you're going to do the other side. You might have to restart more on the wrong side. And I would do even the overlapping ends just to make it clean. Helps make it nice looking on both sides. Helps get rid of all that fuzzy looking stuff from the skiving. A little bit. Check your corners. All good. Okay, so if you've done every part, then you should have these nice, smooth, beveled edges that are not sharp edges. They should be nice and rounded. And now we're gonna need our Tokonole burnishing cream again, and either canvas to rub with or a burnishing tool. So this is regular old plain duck canvas. I got it at Joann's. And then this is a burnishing tool, and you can use either one or both. So you're gonna open your Tokonole. And I like to do a little dab on my finger like that, and you're gonna put little dots on all the raw edges. And then you kind of want to smooth it out a little bit as you go, and then I do one side at a time. Paper towels and rags are nice to have handy here because you get a lot of stuff on your fingers between the gluing and the sandpaper, etc. Then once it's applied, and kind of rub it in a little bit, then you can take your burnishing tool, and I'm going to use, I have now Tokonole on it, I'm going to wipe that off real quick. Mine is a wooden one, and I'm going to use the smallest one, and you're just going to rub that edge until it shines, and then it'll be sealed. Now you don't want to use a lot of pressure here because you can actually push the leather down. You just want a light touch, and you just want to run it fast. Now if you want to skip this step and just use canvas, you can. Canvas gives the most shine, but this is my literal favorite thing to do when I make leather stuff, is the burnishing. I love nothing more than this part, and it's so satisfying because it gets all shiny and the color comes out. It looks so nice, which is why I like veg tan a lot, because veg tan is what burnishes. Okay, so you can see that I got some shine going and it's sealed. And if you want extra shine, then this is where the canvas will come in. I'm gonna do half of it, and I'm gonna show you how much of a difference it makes. So I don't know if you can see that on camera, but the half that I did the canvas on is much smoother and shinier. But they both work fine, and they both will work. So I'm gonna just finish it so that it matches. And you're gonna do this to every side of the leather, including these ends. So when you're done, you should have these very pretty, shiny, smooth edges that feel sealed. And that's when you know you've burnished enough. Next, you're gonna need a wing divider in order to mark your stitching line. And you're going to need leather glue. I'm using Saragum glue. Doesn't matter which leather glue you want to use. An applicator for the leather glue, and stitching chisels, and a maul. These are, and a mat, your pounding mat, in order to do the stitching. So you want to take your wing divider and you want to set it to what's a comfortable stitching line for you. I've got mine set at about 1/4 of an inch or 5 millimeters. And you're going to go only to the right side of the end. You're going to plant it so that it's there, and you're just going to lightly drag it across so you get your stitching line. Next, I'm going to use my 6-prong stitching chisel, and I'm going to make it so that the line is parallel or perpendicular to me. You always want to do your stitching so that your actual stitching chisel is perpendicular to you because you'll get the straightest lines. So then you're going to take your stitching chisel, line it up where you want it to start, which is not at the edge, but right next to it. As it goes down, you don't want it to go through. Line it up, stand it up straight, and grab your maul. And pound until you go through. Okay, nice, neat. This is a diamond stitching chisel, so we're gonna have diamond stitches here. And this is a rubber mat so that you don't damage your cutting mat. Then you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna go to the most recent hole and you're gonna put the top tong there. Line up the line, hold it steady, hit. Now you can see here that doesn't need 6, so you can either go off to a number 2 or you could redo some of the holes if it lines up properly for you. I'm gonna go to a 2. Just to make it nice and even. Maybe one more. There we go. Okay. You are not gonna do this end because we need to do that in a different way or they might not line up once we glue it together. Now you're gonna need your glue and either a leather rougher or your sandpaper again. Now this side is roughed up and ready to glue and it's gonna go like this, right? So you just wanna make sure that there's no remaining Tokonole on it because you want it to take. So we're just gonna rough it up a little bit just to make sure the glue sticks. Same thing on the other side. Just to make sure the glue sticks. Had to switch glues because my other glue had glued itself shut. I could not get it open. So this is Sewa leather adhesive that I'm going to use instead. You're gonna get a small amount and you're going to apply it to this section that will overlap. Evenly. And this is my glue mat again, so I don't get glue on my cutting mat. Without setting it down, this is kind of the tricky part. You're gonna do the other side. Now the thing about leather glue is you don't just put the glue on and stick it together. You actually have to let it sit so it tacks up a little bit so that it'll hold and not just fall apart, especially something round like this, once we let go. Now just let it dry a little bit. It'll get semi-translucent when it's ready to go. Different leather glues do different things. Some people use leather or contact cement. That really has to tack up. But most leather glues you'll find you have to let them sit and dry a little bit. So you can see when it's like halfway white, halfway clear, that we're pretty much ready to go to try to put it together. So you want to carefully take your edges and line them up along that line that we had skived, making sure that they're even along the bottom and the top. Press firmly, and then if you're doing it right, then it should hold, shouldn't let go. And you can continue to let this dry if you'd like, or we can go right on to the next step. As long as it's holding, you're good. For the next step, what you're gonna need is a cork piece. This is literally from a wine bottle, but if you don't have this, any kind of chunk of cork will work. This is so you don't hurt yourself. And then a stitching awl. This is a Rocky Mountain brand stitching awl that matches the size of my stitching chisels. If you don't have these, you could try punching through the other one before we glued it together and trying to line them up, but you'd have to do that very carefully because the problem is this is a round object and you cannot now punch it because it would squish it. So that's why you need the cork and the stitching awl. So if you're using the stitching awl, you're going to hold it on the other side of where the stitching holes are that we've already done, like this, and then you're going to take your stitching chisel and push it through the pre-existing hole down through the other leather. Now this is kind of hard to do with that angle that I'm holding it at for the camera. You'll have to push pretty hard, and then it'll go right into the cork and not into your hand, and then you pull it back out. And you just work your way down the whole stitching line. This is actually easier when the object is not round, but this is the only way to do it. Also making sure your stitching awl is very sharp. This one is brand new, so it should be quite sharp. So once you've done that, if you look on the inside, you'll have a perfect line of stitching holes that match exactly what you have on the outside. We are almost done. We're down to the final pieces of the puzzle. So the only thing left to do is stitch it up. So for this, you're gonna need saddle stitching needles, of which I've got John James number 4s. And you're gonna need thread for leatherworking. Now I've got Ritza Tiger thread in a whole bunch of colors here. And these are the number 6 thread. Now once you're ready to stitch, you're gonna need 2 of the John James needles and your thread. I've chosen this color because I think it goes well with the green. And you wanna get at least about 2 to 3 times the amount you need, depending on the thickness of the leather. I'm gonna go with 3 to be safe. And this is a waxed thread, so you can notice it's pretty sturdy. So you're gonna unwind, and you want enough to work with too when it's something this short. So I'm gonna wind quite a bit, probably have 1.5 to 2 feet here. And I'm gonna show you how to thread the needles. So you're gonna take your needle, you're gonna thread your thread through it, then you're gonna put your thread back on itself and pierce the top tail of the thread with your needle. Like that, it's making a loop, and then you're gonna pull it tight and push it down the length of the needle like that, and it creates a loop that secures your needle to the thread. You're gonna do the same thing on the other side so that you have a needle at each end of your thread. You should now have 2 secure needles at the ends. Now the next part can use a stitching pony. Stitching pony is designed to be sat upon, and it holds your leather project in the clamp so it doesn't move on you when you stitch it. Now I'm not going to sit on it because of filming purposes, but I am going to use it to help hold this steady while I stitch it. So you always want to stitch the line coming towards you. So you start at the back and you work your way towards you. So to do that, I'm going to open, and I'm gonna have to put it like in there in a kind of an awkward way. This is a somewhat awkward thing to stitch for this, but then you get it like that, and you can see here's my stitching line pointing towards me, and I'm gonna start at the top. Now you have a choice here. You can wrap the thread around the ends for security, or you can only have them in the middle. If you're gonna wrap the thread around the ends, you have to start with them coming through the same hole so that they wrap there, or you would just start in the very first hole. This is another one that I made using green thread. You can see really well that I did not wrap the ends there, and I just stitched it through, which is fine, holds securely, but if you want it to be more secure, you can wrap it. So maybe I'll wrap this one because I didn't do it on this one. So you're gonna go 1 thread in, 1 needle in, and pull. And you want to make them even. And then you're going to take the one that's on the outside here, and you're going to go into the next hole so that it'll wrap. So that's going to be how you start it. So you're going to pull firm, but not super firm. You're going to take the one that's pulling out underneath over to the outside, and you're going to put it in the very first hole, being careful not to pierce the other thread. This is to help it wrap. Pull it tight. There we go. Okay, now you can proceed to saddle stitch as normal. So saddle stitch is normal. You're going to start on your left side, put the left needle in. Don't pull it tight. Get that underneath. Then you're going to stitch the right needle through the same hole, which is harder when it's round like this because you can't see. Push it up through, being careful not to pierce the other thread, and a way to check that is to pull this one a little bit so that you know you didn't. Then you're going to do what we call the cast, and you're going to wrap it around your needle, then pull that one, get your other one in your hand now that you've got it all set out. Mine is inside the thing. And then pulling in opposite diagonal angles, and then firm but not super tight. I'm going to repeat that all the way down. Now you could backstitch up here for extra security, but I don't think there's going to be a huge amount of stress on a Starbucks cup sleeve, but we will backstitch up here just to seal the stitch off. So feel free to do it however you want. So again, left needle goes first, pull it partially through, right needle goes through the same hole, holding that other thread out of the way. Make sure that you did not pierce the other thread. Wrap it over the needle to cast, and then pull in opposite diagonal directions, firm but not too tight. Because of how I'm filming this, I kind of have to bend over to be able to see the hole. Now I pierced it just there, but pulling it got it off. Easy to do in this particular project. It's a great way to practice saddle stitching is little projects like this, because I think the stitching is the hardest thing to make look good when you're a beginner. Or when you're stitching round things sometimes. So say as a beginner you did catch your thread on your first go or two. You want to undo it if you can by threading the proper needle right back through it to get it out of being stuck. Or if you have enough length, if it got stuck like way up here or something, with this project we don't need that much thread, you'd be able to cut it out of the way and it wouldn't damage anything for the thread's integrity. Now when you get to the end here, you're going to want to do back stitching, but also if you want to overlap here, you're going to have to do that by taking one of the needles and coming back through the same hole. So I'm going to take the inner needle, come back through the same hole, pull it tight, and then you're going to continue doing the saddle stitch but in reverse to reinforce. Now if you want to reinforce up here, you can actually take this one and also put it back through as well. And you want to line them up so that they land in the same spot, like that. Okay, so now we've got those two doubled on the top, and I'll put it back in for a minute to the stitching pony. And then we're going to backstitch a little bit so that we can seal the thread in there. So I've got one on the inside and one on the outside. You'll come through with the left first, and this will be the next hole right here. Taking it off the stitching pony. Holding it is easier. So come through this one. Don't come through all the way. Grab your other needle, come through the same hole that you just came out of, like that, and do the cast again. And pull tight, just like you did before. We're just going in the opposite direction. And you can see now we've got double, double. And then to finish it off, I'm gonna end it on the inside of this so that you don't see the stitching sealed. So you're gonna come over, you can do this quite a few more holes, but this is just a sleeve. So I think we'll be okay. So I'm gonna go through one more hole right here with this thread so that they're both on the inside. Pulled tight. Okay, then on the inside you should have 2 threads hanging like so from 2 holes next to each other. And then you're gonna take a pair of scissors and you're gonna cut them to about 1/8 of an inch short. So we did have extra threads. So you didn't need as much, but it helped to maneuver for filming. And then your last step is, once you have those 2 little thread tails hanging out, is to melt them down. And you can use a lighter, or I have a thread zapper here. You have to be careful with these. They can imprint your leather like a brand with the little prongs that it has. But this is what I have down here. So you would take either the lighter or a thread zapper and melt the threads and then mush them down so that they seal to the thread below them. And you can take anything you want and just kind of rub it just to get those to seal. And then you should have little plastic nubs from where you had melted your polyester thread into itself, and they won't go anywhere. And then you did it. We're all done, and we have a nice Starbucks sleeve. Now there is one more optional step that you don't have to do. If you don't want your stitching to stick up a bit, you can hammer it down, but it's hard to do because, again, it's round. But you can do it. I did do it on this one a little bit. As you can see, it's a little bit flatter sitting, and it helps the stitching to stick in and not take as much friction and abuse. But again, you don't have to do that. And I kind of like how it looks. I'll show you what the difference would be though. So this is how it is without. And you need a special hammer for this. It's got to be one that has a rounded edge that's not going to put imprints into the leather. This is a C.S. Osborne company cobbler hammer. And what you're going to do with this is not normally how you would do it, but I just hold it in my hand and lightly tap it out. And it just makes it lie down a little bit flatter. And this is something you would want to normally do with most of your stitching if you have the tools to do so, because then you get that really nice even look on it. And there we go, a perfect fit. Looks really cool, very fancy if you were to take this into a Starbucks. So thanks for watching, and I hope you had a good time with this beginner leatherworking video making these cool Starbucks sleeves. And remember, if you like my content, to like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you next time.